Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I know it's Friday at 4, but we are still at work here at the Moyer Press. And I guess it doesn't look like work because it's so much fun. But we are here in the studio with Graham Snyder. That's your name, right? Graham Snyder.
Yeah.
I rarely say your last name. So you just had a birthday, didn't you?
Yeah, a couple days ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, how old are you?
Oh, I'd rather not say.
Really? Really? You're private about your age. Well, I'm
Yeah.
40. I'm 48, in case you were wondering.
Oh, okay.
So.
Similar.
Anyway, no, I'm pretty sure you're younger than me, but we're not here to talk about your age. I can always divine your age. Just kidding. There's some things you can't divine.
All
Um,
my secrets.
so today, this episode stemmed from this group that you're starting. Tell us about the group you're starting.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had this idea about a month ago, I guess, to start a group here in Portland talking about divination. Which is sort of related to astrology. It's not the same, but there's a lot of overlap, and there are certain parts of astrology that are straight up divination. And I thought it would be cool to kind of have like I hadn't really seen a space where people were addressing that specifically. So I
Hmm.
thought, what a great thing to like. There's like so many different ways people do divination that I figured the best way would be to have it be an open discussion and people can bring all their own experiences and stuff I haven't heard of, and we can make it like this really kind of fruitful like dialogue, and yeah.
Well,
So
I'm surprised to hear you say that astrology is not divination. I mean, I think in the church where they basically kill all false prophets. They include astrologers in that. So how can you say astrology is not divination?
yeah, I mean, I think it could be seen as that. I kind of think of it as like divination in this is different in different contexts, but I feel like a lot of the time it's taking the kind of temperature of the moment. Um, which astrology does do sometimes, but usually in the context of reading someone's birth chart, which is great. I mean, I feel like reading the birth chart is um, maybe you could call it like a subgroup of divination, but it's its own thing. It's its own. We do transits and progressions and all kinds of things based on the natal chart. That in astrology, I feel like it yeah, definitely. If you're talking about like the outside world, I don't think people would see much of a difference. But I think within it, astrology is a whole world of its own information, and yeah, I think there's definitely been like over the centuries like a philosophical orientation away from divination and astrology, like and wanting to say that it's a science and it's like it follows these like kind of like eternal laws. And think I don't know. I think um, there's fruitful discussions we had about like what is going on when we're doing astrology, But yeah, I think like uh, I've noticed in practice though, like a lot of astrologers have a divination practice on the side. They do read tarot cards, or they use the I Ching, or there's a lot of other things people do that like you know um,
So I'm looking up divination, and it's saying it's the practice of seeking knowledge about the future, hidden information, or divine guidance through non-rational means such as rituals, omens, or um, spiritual inspiration. And I would say, in some ways, astrology is not non-rational means. I mean, don't you think astrology is more like, I think of it as like divination often pulls like a random content generator on the future. Like if you pull a tarot
yeah.
card in your future, it's like, all right, random content generation, tell me what's going to happen. That seems more like divination, but astrology is a very rational set of. It doesn't seem like a random content generator like divination.
Yeah, well, certainly, and especially like the things that I do, I think there's the kind of like the rationale behind that is that there's a specific moment in time that you're accessing, and so even if you pull something that we call random, it's tapping into the particular nature of that moment. Not so different from like when you're doing a birth chart, you're tapping into the particular nature of the moment that person was born, you
Mhm.
know. But yeah, so I think that's where like the randomness comes in. I think there's I think I would see natal astrology as being much more about like um yeah, extrapolating from like the sort of like natural world, like what is happening in that moment that creates the character of that person. And you know, how do you feel about
Well, this moves to your question of who is speaking in divination. So you gave a big list. You were like, it could be spirits, psychology, animism, God, the earth, the void, the anima mundi, or the higher self could all be speaking through the divination track.
that?
I'm making the case that it's random content, but you're saying it's not random because something is speaking. So talk to me about that.
I could see that. Yeah. I'm kind of agnostic on that. I don't quite know what is, you know, what is speaking. Maybe it is, you know, I think the if I were a Jungian, I would say that I'm tapping into the collective unconscious, and that's what's associating meaning with what seems to be synchronistic or random phenomena. Um, but I'm not. I tend to think that the world is a lot stranger than we think. The practice that I associate most with this kind of thing is geomancy, where like at least in the writings of like the 17th century practitioners, they were very clear. They were all coming from a Christian perspective, but saying that okay, there's like the revealed word of God, but then there's also what they called the anima mundi, the spirit of the world that was ever changing, but also it was like the kind of totality of all living things that were all speaking at once. And so they thought that when they were doing geomancy, what they were doing was tapping into the four elements that would each be reflecting the what was going on with the anima mundi at that particular moment. Uh,
What's
so
what's the
yeah,
what's the anima mundi?
yeah, it's the spirit of the world. It's this. There's this beautiful Robert Flood has this beautiful like woodblock carving of this giant woman straddling the earth and all the layers of like the planets and also like the atmosphere and the four elements on earth are all part of um her body and also part of her like perspective. It was really this sort of like you have to get back into a medieval kind of like mind frame where like everything is fully connected and every part of the world that you could experience is all connected in these chains of being that we're all generating from one source, but then we're experienced on this like in this like kind of totality. It's really good. It's really like wrapped up well in the German word Zeitgeist. You know, like the spirit of the time. You know, it's like um, yeah, we still kind of use that concept, but it's not. I think it's hard as like moderns to kind of get into that like oh no, everything really is connected, and not in like a woo woo way, but in like a practical day to day way.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to look at how divination works, right? And I mean, there's the idea of like that it even works at all is in some ways, I don't even know how I feel about that because it's like, when you say, "Oh, I predicted the future with my tarot cards and it happened." Well, we could also say, "Well, you created the future by talking about the future." Like that you manifested the future by reading those tarot cards because you put ideas into the mind of the person whose card you were reading. I mean, like so
Yeah,
the idea, I mean that divination works or doesn't work is kind of an overly simplistic question because it's like it how does it work, what is it doing, how is it working, um is I think a larger, more intricate and nuanced question,
abs- yeah, absolutely. It's I don't think you know it's one of these funny things of like I don't think you could do like a double blind test, you know, like in like the proper like science way and say, oh, this is a result you would have gotten and this is one you wouldn't have. You know, it's very much like yeah, every reading it affects the person getting the reading. Or if you're reading for yourself, the information you're getting is affecting your choices, you know. I think what I would want to say about that is that not every divination is like a direct like, you know, like you must do this kind of thing. It's more like I think a really good divination system will give you like a yes or no answer, perhaps, but like it'll more likely give you context. It'll like, or you might think of that as like you're reading in the context of what you know about a situation, but maybe it's bringing to light things that you maybe wouldn't have necessarily thought of off the bat.
Well, that's where I
The
think
ways to look at that.
Well, that's where I think it is really strong. It's like what we call a poetic text. So in sign language interpreting, there's something called a linear text and there's a poetic text. So, like a linear text will send over a thought picture that's pretty clear. Like if I said 1 + 1 = 2, you're going to get a similar thought picture as the person next to you. That's a linear text. But if I sent over a poetic text, like I was like, so about your situation, temperance. Okay, that's a tarot card, right? Well,
Yeah.
that's actually an abstract concept. Temperance, the state of being
Mhm.
temperate, the state of being like, what does it even mean? So all of a sudden we have a poem here,
I love that card. That's one of my favorites.
but see how it's a poetic text on the situation of like what is
Yeah,
temperance, how does temperance apply. So in some ways the strength of divination isn't necessarily like the correctness or not correctness of it, but it is the poetic formation that it applies to any situation, which allows us to look out the linear text of that situation.
I think there's definitely something about like consciousness, like the human intention to ask a question and that's one of the things with divination I always go back to is that like the question is primal. That's like the fundamental thing. If you're reading for somebody and you're getting 10 different messages and it's like, oh my God, what do I even say? You always take it back to the question because that's like the kind of root of just like the natal chart is like the root of every kind of like chart you make for a person. The question someone asks is like the heart of the divination. That's like where you go to. I do think there's something kind of funny about um uh oh gosh, I'm always so critical of like people who use like quantum science in a way that's like metaphorical. I don't want to do that, but I think there is maybe a metaphor to be used there about, like by putting our attention on something like answering a question, we're kind of collapsing the waveform of like all of the possible things that um, a randomizing tool like a deck of cards or a set of dice could say, and we're somehow by creating that intention between two people in a certain moment in time and in a particular circumstance, like something about that intentionality makes that meaningful. And maybe it's just projection, but also maybe I think the
Well,
universe is strange enough that like I think the universe kind of runs on story in some ways, and it's like I think the the world will tell us a real story if we ask it in the right way.
well,
I know it doesn't really seem logical, but
it's like a container to ponder on that question. Like the same is true of an astrology reading. Like people say, is astrology helpful? Well, the container provided to look at whatever your inquiry is helpful. I mean, if nothing else, it's helpful to think on a question. So if you said like, what should I be looking for to succeed in my love relationship? Even the act of pondering that question is useful.
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it certainly like gives us space. I think that's what a lot of people do get out of like getting any kind of reading, whether it's astrology reading or any other, is like yeah, attention to stuff that they maybe haven't even given themselves permission to ask or think about.
Do you
Um,
so how much do you tailor the question in a divination? Like, do you
I tend to solicit the question from the person who's asking it, and then I do tend to kind of try to tease out like um, nuances because usually the client doesn't they don't usually ask the exact question they really have right off the bat. Sometimes you have to kind of like dig a little bit, and you don't want to like put words in their mouth, but also, if you ask some follow-up questions, they may alter it. When I did that reading for you for Moira, like I gave it a little like rhyming thing to it. I think there's a fun thing to like um, have a to reframe a question sometimes in a way that's like memorable and also especially like this is something, especially coming from horror, using symbolism that's like related to the natural world. So like instead of saying like, will such and such happen on like June 2nd, 2026, you might ask something more like, will such and such happen this spring? Or will such and such happen this week or month? It's like there's something about like using um natural sort of timescales or things that like the whoever we're addressing maybe isn't coming at it from a human perspective. So using like a common ground, like a symbolic framework that's the nature based is oftentimes a really helpful way to. That's a great reframe. Sometimes it's like how would this look from a perspective radically different from ours? Like
Hmm. So this brings up the question, which you didn't have this question on your list, but I have it on my list, which is
yeah.
when is when is it appropriate to use divination, and when is it not? Like, when are good times for it?
Yeah. I think first of all, I think any time can be a good time to ask a certain kind of question. I think it's very like culturally specific. So like if you look at the records of like astrologers like Simon Foreman or William Lilly, who were writing in the 16th and 17th century, they were answering stuff for people that like we probably would not ask today. But that's because they're coming from an agrarian context where like life was really short and brutal, and I think a lot of times, more times today, people want to ask psychological questions like, will I be happy with so and so, or like, is my job going to be fulfilling for me in 5 years, or stuff like that. That's like more, and people were definitely asking that kind of stuff as well way back when. But like, I think it's helpful like when you're really bothered by something and it kind of comes back to you multiple times like, oh god, how is this going to work out, or what is the situation with x person or x situation. I think that's the perfect time to go seek some kind of divination experience, whether it's with your just by yourself or with a professional, or I think that's kind of like something that humans have been doing all throughout history, and it's really kind of like in our modern secular world where like we've kind of forgotten that we have this resource that we can go to sometimes,
Mhm.
and many cultures haven't forgotten, and they're like they've been doing it, and they're like, what are you weird westerns doing? you know um,
Well, I like that as far as like sometimes there's an unresolved issue, like you can't get resolution. Like let's say you have an unresolved issue and the person dies, or like they move away and block you or something like that. And like then you can't get resolution through the person or through real life means, quote unquote. But then maybe the poetic formation of the divinatory tool will help you get out of your head on that situation. Um,
Absolutely.
what I don't love when people do this stuff is they're like, okay, I want to build a school. I'm going to pull the cards to see what happens. To me, that's being a beta on your future. Like, I'm going to let the cards tell me what's going to happen with my school instead of being a manifester, which is like, I'm going to manifest a school.
You're saying it's too passive. It's like it's yeah, I can see that. I don't really see it that way. I think if you treated a person like you treated a divination tool, that would be really passive and kind of like letting someone like rule your life. I think the key factor there that you're not taking into account is that you can ignore it. You can ignore a divination. Like I think it will almost always tell you a true thing. The trick is to like figure out contextually what does it mean and what does it mean for you. And I always take the position that like William Lilly was famous for this. Like he did there's a really great horror he did for himself that was like, should I buy X property? And every indication in it was like, no, don't do it. It's a bad deal. You're going to be in debt for years. It's like, don't do it. And he did it anyway. But because, he decided for whatever, he had particular reasons why he really wanted that to happen. He did it, and it turned out to be a really bad investment, but he got the property he wanted, and
All right,
um,
I'm gonna pull some tarot cards to see how our hour is gonna go right now. Hold on, let's see.
okay, interesting. I love it. I guess I don't really use tarot that much. I know a little bit about it, but
I don't know how the hour's going. I'm going to let the cards decide.
okay.
Oh no, it's the Hermit card. We're supposed to go off and do
Ah,
reflection. Maybe we're supposed to be alone.
that sounds well. The Hermit is a yeah. It's about reflecting. It's about going inside. I think a discussion group very well fits the associations of the Hermit card. But
Well,
yeah, I don't know.
no one's here in the chat and we're all alone. Maybe so we're supposed to
That's
go
it.
off
Maybe it
and
was just
think.
us.
Maybe it's okay. Let's pull another card to decide how this hour's going.
Okay. I think it's going great anyway. But
So you're ignoring. You're just ignoring the divination. I like that.
oh no,
Oh,
I'm watching.
Six of Swords, science.
Ooh. Yeah, Six of Swords. Okay, now I'm not super familiar, but I do read the pip cards as like situations. Sixes, if I remember right, are swords are about the mind and about like kind of like intellectual matters, and swords are like so like cutting through things with your reason and your wit, and then sixes are like it's a new foundation. After the chaos of fives, you get sixes that are like starting a new thing, I think.
Hmm.
And then in terms of the decans, I was with a group that we were talking a lot about the pip cards and the decans. I think the six of swords would be the second decan of Libra, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's like two, three, four, five,
I
six,
don't
seven.
know.
Yeah, the second Libra. So that's cool. So like maybe I think this is like a very we're having like a very balanced dialogue. Like we're both, we're approaching this as like, how do we,
We're
how do we
having a
figure this
very
out?
scientific discussion about
Yeah.
going off and thinking about things that would be determined. We're like talking scientifically about this kind of divinatory process. I don't know. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
a diviner.
Well, and the other part about Six of Wands, sorry, Six of Swords, is I think the goddess it's associated with is my patron goddess, who's Themis, who's
Wow.
who is associated with the Oracle at Delphi, but also like she's the mother of the seasons and the fates. And in the Orphic hymns, they call her the Haruspex of men. So the a Haruspex was like a liver diviner, one of the earliest forms of divination.
Wow.
And Themis was said to be the Haruspex of men. So she was like the one who taught humans how to read in a divinatory way.
Oh, wow.
So I think we're definitely we're in the six of swords means we're in the zone.
So I mean, I feel like we're making it work for us. We're telling a story that we like about the cards that applies to our hour. So in some ways, we're still in control of the hour because we are making the story of the cards. And I see
Oh
where that,
yeah.
you know, I do
Well,
think so. Go ahead.
oh, I just want to say like in general with my clients, I want to give them a sense of agency. I want to feel that make them feel more free to make good choices
Hmm.
than less. I don't want them to feel like, oh, because I'm telling them such and such means this and that, then therefore they have to do this thing they really don't want to do. It's like that's the worst case. You don't want that. And if you get a client that's too passive, it's kind of a problem because it's like, oh, well then what should I just do? And it's like, no, 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 we're co-creating here. Like we got to like create a thing together that's like that works. And this is just giving a little extra spice to the soup to like make it more juicy.
Yeah. Well, I think okay, like in a game of Dungeons and Dragons, there are dice rolls. And those are the random content generation portions of the game. And I think a really well manicured life is like a D&D game where you have a storyline that you've chosen. Okay, I'm going to do an episode with Graham this afternoon. It's going to be great. We have written that into our story. I didn't know in the episode that you would be behind a dark filter. I didn't know that. But
Yeah,
it
is the
is
sun. Yeah.
I know, but it is kind of magical, like a divination feel. But there will be points in the story where like, oh, let's roll the dice on that, which would be the point where you consult your divination, you consult your deck, or you consult your pendulum, or whatever it is that you divine. I consider those dice rolls in the story of life. I think a good game master doesn't call dice rolls too often. Like, if you dice roll and everything, there's not enough of meat to the story that you created yourself. if there's not enough dice rolls, there's not enough random content generation in your life, then it's just not as fun.
Absolutely. I think there's definitely a way that like people can use divination in like an unhealthy way, especially just using it too often. I think that can cause problems. Also, it kind of like it dilutes the power of it because it's like, oh God, I'm just gonna roll the dice again tomorrow, right? It's like, who cares what answer I get today? You know, it's like that becomes that's problematic. It's like I think, you know, the point of it is to make it meaningful. And it can only be meaningful if it's kind of rare. That's why it's also good to charge money for divination because then people don't really go come to you unless they really need to or they really want to. You know, it's like
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the Oracle of Delphi effect is a thing. Like you want to keep yourself in the Oracle zone where people are like, and then I consulted the Oracle on whatever issue. That's very different than being like, oh, I'm just gonna pull a few cards on that thing. You know, it's very different. You know.
yeah, yeah. You had to travel. You had to hike up a mountain. Can I tell you, I've actually been to Delphi. It's hard to get to.
Oh, interesting.
It's not there anymore in the way it was in the classical world, but you can get like a postcard there that's like it will show you like where the pillars and all these places around Greece gave gifts to the oracle. So there was all these enormous statues and things that like, you know, and of course over centuries it's all gone away, but like, you know, it's a beautiful kind of like thing to think. It's like if you were a king or somebody back in that time who had a really important question, should I go invade Persia? Right? We're all kind of thinking this right now. It's like, oh God, we wish our leaders maybe didn't go invade Persia. You know, but like, you know, people had to travel for weeks or months to get there. You know, people might die on the way there or back. You know, it's like it was a big sacrifice to go ask the oracle something, and even then, it was never the expectation was not that it would be a clear answer. You know, it would always be something obscure.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so let's move on to this question, which you posed, which is getting into the divinatory state of mind. How do you
Yeah,
do that?
that's a really good one. I think there's something, well, how do I say this? I think there's like, you can just do a divination on the fly, like say you're on the bus and you just really need to ask something in the moment, you can. I think that though it's better to do some things ahead of time to like kind of prepare yourself mentally, but also kind of like be open to possibilities. I think like for some people that's saying, saying a certain invocation or lighting incense or even just playing music that gets kind of gets you in the zone. I
Uh-huh.
think there's kind of like this liminal kind of space psychologically where like it's kind of like unfocusing your eyes. There's a way in which like you can let in meaning in a way that's like um helpful, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any like a super profound thing to say about that. Oh, and you're lighting you're lighting some incense right there.
Yeah.
Nice.
I can't smell my incense because Saturn's in Aries and like the sun just went over it. My nose got all stuffed up and like no, then I couldn't smell my incense, so I couldn't get into a divinatory state of mind. No, just kidding, just kidding. Um, no, but I hear what you're saying. Is like I think like okay, so similar to how people like smoke weed in order to like be creative or whatever. It's like it's not. I don't think the weed makes people creative. I think it's the permission and container they set for themselves to then be creative. I think it's similar to have rituals that get you into the divinatory state of mind. Like it's almost like if I light my incense, then I will all of a sudden be ready to divine or kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
I no, are those things necessary? Can you just divine though? Can you just be like, I'm gonna pull some cards? Like, can you just do it or what? I mean,
I think it's very contextual, and it's like certain methods lend themselves. Like geomancy is like it doesn't matter. You can just do it, and it will give you a pretty straightforward answer. Now, the thing with what's cool about geomancy though is you can also like take that answer and go several levels deeper on it if you want to through the symbolism of the process because it's rich enough that it has that level you can go down into. But fundamentally it'll give you a pretty clear kind of yes or no. Whereas if you're using something like tarot or Lenormand cards, that can be very impressionistic. You can get, and also I think that's the other part is like divination doesn't always work at the same level. Like some days you ask a question and you get a strong answer, and it's like, oh my god, that's like clearly it. There's just kind of like that click moment. and other times it's really not clear. And that's especially with horror too. That's like certain questions are quote unquote radical, as in like they're rooted in the symbolism of your birth chart. They're rooted in the symbolism of the chart itself is rooted in the sense that it has like several overlapping or stacking parts of it that line up. And then you would say, oh, well, this is clearly like an answer that has like some weight to it, some potency. But sometimes you get an answer that's like, you know, and that's just like,
I wonder if the beta wave state of the brain has anything to do with it, because there's like alpha waves and beta waves, and I think, if
mm,
you want to do a really good kind of open yourself up to impressions and things, like you want to get more into that like beta state. And I don't know,
I
maybe
don't
that's what
know.
we're talking about, like the meditations and things, like maybe that gets people into that state.
I think so. I think, especially like the ancient Greeks did what was called oneiromancy, which was like reading of dreams. But the way they would do it is that you would have to eat a certain diet and you would have to like sleep underground in they called it katabasis, going underground. And, you had to like kind of like purify your senses and your physical body to allow for like divine messages to come into you through your dreams. And then you would go to the specialist who would like interpret them for you. I think there is definitely something about like if you're in a more healthy state, or if you've got your equilibrium and your balance right. I think there's a way that you're generally more open to receiving messages. I don't know. It's like when you're stressed. It's like you can't really hear anything properly because it's like because you're in reaction mode. Yeah, I know there's like a chemical part to that to the body that like I don't know the words around that, but like yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as like up stim and down stim. It's like I think you got to kind of down stim yourself to the
yeah,
point where you're like open to receive a thought, whereas like your mind's not racing, or kind of thing. You know, but yeah, I mean, I think that people can play up the whole ritualistic part of it as much as they want. I mean, I think if you're going to go to an oracle, there should be a little performance of oraculism. You know what I mean? Of less like
yeah.
swinging the incense canister or whatever it is that shows you're in a magical place. There's something to that performativity as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of this is performance. I mean, I think, well, especially like incense. It's great that you brought that up because I think, smell is one of the things that's most closely associated with our memories. So
Mm.
it's like if you build up a divinatory practice where you use incense,
Mhm.
every time you light incense in the future, it's touching your brain back into that memory of that moment before when you were in that open state of mind. It's almost like a shortcut, like having that smell is like a shortcut to getting back to that divinatory space.
What
I'm
is
sorry.
what is Ren?
Oh, Zazen. Yeah, that's oh, I
Zazen.
just put that on the list. I was just kind of like that's like in Zen Buddhism, it's a state of like sort of uh oh God, this is not my practice. I probably shouldn't be speaking on this too much, but like I think it's a state of like awareness of like being fully in the present moment, like fully aware and like because we're in like a flow state, I think.
Mhm.
Uh,
Interesting. Getting in the flow. What is automatic writing?
Oh, yeah, that's something that was really popular in the 19th century. It was this idea that like if you kind of like um unfocused your mind and you just kind of let your hand move and write without paying attention to it, like you would be able to channel messages. And I think nowadays we would definitely call that like in like a Freudian sense, you're tapping into your unconscious, right? You're allowing your kind of like repressed thoughts and feelings to surface and like but it's just it's another one of those ways of like getting into the right state of mind where you can allow yourself to hear messages from outside, whatever you define outside as being,
So I write in a journal like 3 days, 3 pages a day, and in the artist way workbook, they call them the morning pages, although I don't always get to them in the morning. But you're supposed to basically talk to your higher realms for 3 pages a day to kind of, is that the same as automatic writing where you just write into a journal, kind of like, I'm always like, God, what is your will for my life today? And is that automatic writing, or does it
I
have to
think
be?
it's similar. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I think there's certain kinds of like ways of that you're supposed to like sort of actively not think about what you're writing about when you're doing it. But morning pages I think are a great way to kind of like just get out like a bunch of like ideas that have been like, especially I don't know if you're like me and you're an insomniac who like stays awake at night thinking of that things. It's like if you can write it down in the morning and just kind of get it out of your system, then you're kind of open for like new thoughts and experiences to come in, right? It's kind of like I feel like it's kind of like that, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I want to look up define automatic writing. Um, it's the practice of producing written words without conscious intention, thought, or editing, often appearing as a stream of consciousness or a flow state. It is used as a tool to tap into the subconscious mind for creativity, self discovery, or in spiritual context, to channel messages from spirits or higher beings. So,
I think part of it is like writing really fast too. Like you're writing so fast that you can't edit yourself. You can't check for your grammar, your spelling. You're just writing, writing, writing. And there's a certain way in which you kind of get out in front of your own like hypercritical self censor, and like you could just if you write really fast, you can just kind of outpace that and just like and then you might say something really weird or write something really weird, and it's like, oh, where'd that come from? The killer came from somewhere.
well, it's saying the definition is writing produced involuntarily, often while attention is focused elsewhere in a meditative or hypnotic state. But then it has usage examples of creative writing or brainstorming, which is writing quickly without pausing. Therapeutic journaling, like I was saying, allowing
Oh
hidden
yeah.
emotions, fears, or subconscious to surface on paper to gain clarity. So I guess that is kind of automatic writing. Surrealist art would be a technique used by surrealists to bypass rational thought and explore unconscious mind. Interesting. So I can see where that gets you in touch with your higher self in some ways, especially if you have a verbal chart. Like, I'm a Gemini rising, so I just have tons of words coming in. And if I want to talk to God, I have to be like, God, what is your will for this? And then I get like hundreds of words. It's like different than if somebody had
Yeah.
like Mercury and Taurus and they have a more slow mind. They might not get that same flow of words, kind of thing. But
Do you have an experience of like certain parts of this are like what I'm writing, and then at a certain point, does it kind of stop being you and it's just words that are coming from outside somewhere? Do you get that feeling?
well, I have a really conscious contact with God. I mean, I have a moon square Neptune, and I've been talking to spirit guides for 25 years daily. So for me, my thoughts and God thoughts are pretty much one and the same. It's not like I separate. Like I'm always open to this channel of God coming through. Like so, I don't think I have the same blockages that a lot of people do to God thoughts. Like
You've been working on it a lot, yeah.
yeah. In fact, when I started, I had this little space right here where a spirit guide would talk to me through this little kind of vortex in my forehead. And now it's like, it's just a channel. It just feels like it's like this big channel to the higher self. But it started as like it kind of grew over the years. And I don't know what that is. If it's a synapse or if I don't know what you would call it. But
Oh, Socrates might have called it his daimon, right? It's like
oh, yeah.
like there. I don't know. I think
Oh my God, we
I
should read the book, The God of Socrates.
sure, absolutely.
Oh,
I thought about this discussion group could become a book club. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, I think it's funny. I tend to like lean towards I think a more like perhaps like animist perspective that it's like everything is kind of speaking. You go up to a tree that's really ancient and it's like, oh, that tree has like its own thoughts and its own message to tell. And it's like if we can be open enough to hear things, I think the world has impressions to give us that like you know uh it's different ways of conceptualizing things, but a lot of people kind of this like um
Well, that sounds like augury.
yeah, perhaps
People
yeah,
watch
and that's definitely a form of divination. I don't
well, the
people
Quakers
do
do
that.
that.
I don't do that, but
the Quakers do that too. They read God in everything. So they'll be driving down the street, and if they read a billboard that speaks to them, they say that's God talking to them through the billboard, and that's augury, which is spelled Augury. But that's like reading the portents all over the place. And tarot is like a form of like condensed augury, basically, or any
Absolutely.
divination is. So you can actually divine without a tool. You can just look around and start divining if you. I mean, is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I think some people do, especially there's certain forms of like I think Norse divination that are like you go on a certain day of the year, you go for a walk, and everything you encounter has a divinatory meaning because you started that walk with the intention of like hearing it.
Oh wow.
There's definitely like I think what was it I had a thought about this and I was going to say it and I forgot. Um, but oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know where my thought went there, but yeah, I think there is you can get messages from outside. I think oh, I remember what I was going to say that there's something about the idea of omens like to be engaged in divination is to be actively seeking out omens. And sometimes like you just encounter something in the wild that's like super weird. Like you're on a road trip and you see a white deer that's like those aren't supposed to be around, it's like or whatever, like or 10 black crows are all like looking straight at you and it's like, oh, that's weird. What does that mean?
Hmm.
But those kind of things are omens, and I think a lot of divination systems are a way to kind of like um in a sort of like domesticated way make an encounter with the real or like the things that are not created by us, randomness, um, and experience it meaningfully as like an omen. So in a sense, like when you're rolling dice, you're doing kind of the same thing that ancient Mesopotamians did when they cut open a sheep's liver and like we're looking for certain patterns. It's like the intention to make something meaningful makes it meaningful.
Oh, interesting. Did I ever tell you about the time I got thrown in the slammer for reading Cars?
No, really? Oh, for cars. You told me about this. Yeah.
Yeah, like I was divining through cars. I would sit out my window and look, and I kept talking about the cars and the cars flying at me, and they're like, "She's schizophrenic," and they put me in the hospital. When I was talking to Shane about it, because I was like, "I got to go out and read cars," and like he was like, "Oh, you're doing augury. You're like reading flocks of birds, but they're cars, right?" And I have this like really intense system of like green cars are this person, orange cars are this person, and it's all set up on people's charts, and like like you might be like a red or brown car because you're an Aries with a Capricorn moon, like I might have a Graham car that comes in, or but like I was basically doing omenology. But I like what you're saying that because schizophrenias would be classified as like over divining issues, like where you're looking for omens in every single thing to the point of being pathological. And I think I'm not. I don't mean to detract from the topic of
No,
today.
no, this is a good point. I think what you're saying is like schizophrenia is like you can't stop, you can't help but read meaning into everything. Is
Yes,
that you're right?
basically,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's real, and that could be really God. What a terrible way to be. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't want to, like that's yeah, that could be really. I can imagine that being really terrifying. Like, I
Well,
think part of what
it's it creates a certain amount of fatigue and things like that, like meaningful fatigue or whatever. But I mean, there are worse problems to have, right? Like everything's too meaningful, and you think God's talking to you everywhere. Like, oh my God, thank you.
that
I'll
could be
take that
huge.
problem.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you perceive it. Yeah, I guess I think I like having a divinatory practice where it's like that's where sometimes like numerology kind of trips me up because it's like I don't really vibe with it because it's like well you can see numbers everywhere, especially in our modern world where like you're seeing 10,000 things a day and it's like they all have numbers. You could potentially be reading numbers all the time and like what's the significance? I much prefer a divination system where it's like you open it up, you do the reading, then you close it, and then it's over. It's like
Actually, super
cleanse it
good
clean.
point. It's a contained divination because I think when we open ourselves up to augury, which is reading omens everywhere,
Yeah.
it becomes that thing where in a D&D game, if the whole thing was a dice roll, that would just that's a different game. That's not a story, a life story game. That's like now a game like Yahtzee where nothing means
Yeah,
anything because you're rolling dice and rolling dice and rolling dice and rolling dice. And I think having containment for the divination makes it a beautiful thing. I think there's a good point there.
I think that's right. It's like eating, right? It's like we need to eat. We need to make meaning. But at the same time, if you eat all the time and you overeat, you're gonna be sick, you know. But
Yeah.
in the same way, it's like if we make, it would on the other side, it'd be horrible to be able to not make meaning at all, right? You can everything's just like just a gray wasteland of nothingness, right? Like that's horrible too.
Mm.
But on the other hand, if you're trying to make meaning all the time, yeah, that's overwhelming, right? It
Well,
can overwhelm your system.
and I think what's cool about this point too is that diviners are meaning makers in people's lives. Like same with astrology. I think, what do we do? Are we offering entertainment? Well, I think we're offering content, meaning content on people's lives. Like your life means this, your life path is this. Like, so I think providing we solve problems of like existential boredom or existential crisis of like what am I here to do, or like, so I do think there's a big service to humanity in the making of meaning and looking for omens and magic in things that for some of us who are more magically inclined, that's a beautiful thing we can offer to other people. Because maybe if you have fatigue from offering meaning to your own life over and over, what you're really here to do is make meaning of a lot of lives. And in that case, it doesn't get all scattered and weird. It's perfectly contained, but scattered in a lot of places.
Totally see that. Andy, can I tell you something kind of this is something I don't really tell people often, but like I do natal readings, but I don't know, I kind of get intimidated by them. Do you ever feel this? Like, I don't
Every
know.
time, every time I do a reading for 23 years, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super intimidating because you're like dealing with a person's whole life and their potential and their everything in the context of their life, right? I don't know. For me, I kind of love doing like horror astrology because it's not quite as big,
Oh,
because it's focused on the question.
mm,
It's like, you know, you can be, matter of fact about it. You can even be kind of harsh about it because it's not really about the person, it's about the thing they're asking about.
mm.
I don't know. I kind of love that. I think I'm more drawn to like the divination end of things than the natal astrology end because it's like there's a way in which like okay, I had this kind of galaxy brain thought the other day. It's like how people make astrological talismans,
Mhm.
and it's like you infuse a stone with an herb with a certain kind of incense smoke at a certain astrologically appointed time, and that creates a being, right? That creates a thing that can be protective of you, or it can be, it
Mhm.
has meaning, and then the thing itself also has a lifespan, and it'll break, or when its usefulness is used up, it will
Mm.
break. So yeah, there's talismans, right? And then I had this thought. It's like, oh, but humans, we're kind of like the ultimate talismans because we're created at a certain time with a certain intention by people, namely usually our parents, whatever intention that is. And it's like, and we're constantly generating meaning, and then we live for about 70 to 100 years optimally, and then we die. It's like
Mhm.
we are talismans, right?
Yeah, that's
And
amazing.
then I had the galaxy brain thought. It's like, oh, what if the natal chart is just a horary, but it's not a human asking the horary question, it's the universe asking the horary question, and the answer is that person.
Whoa.
I know, right?
That's when Graham dropped acid. No, I'm just kidding. Oh my God, that's such a good thought.
Not out of character.
Okay, let's talk about the next question or thing you brought up, which is accepting bad answers or mean answers. I
Yeah.
personally take all the bad cards out of my tarot deck. That's how I do it.
That's fair. If you're at a party and you're reading for people, this is controversial, but I think take the death card out. You don't necessarily need it at a party. But, when you're reading for people and they have a genuine question for you, it's like, um, I think it's important to that's why we have negative cards like the Tower or the Devil. It's like, um, or even in geomancy, you get Carcer, and it's like, oh, that means like isolation and imprisonment, and it's like, oh, that's kind of rough. I think it's important though to hold space for that because life is there are outcomes in life that will be negative, and it's like I think being able to hold to be kind to someone you're reading for, but also to hold space for the fact that like you may your duty as a diviner is to actually read what's on the cards. It's not to sugarcoat it or try to make people feel wonderful all the time, because at the end of the day that's kind of fake.
Hmm.
It's like if you're really doing it for real, you need to be willing to be able to give answers that people aren't going to like. So people may get really mad at you and like want their money back, or but I've found oftentimes people really do appreciate a bad answer. Someone asked me a health question one time, and I generally tend not to answer those, but they rephrased it in a way that I was like, okay, I think I can answer this. But I had to tell them it's like, it doesn't, from what I'm seeing here, it doesn't look good. And it's like,
Hmm.
and they kind of sat with that, and I said, well, that's kind of how I thought. Um, and I think they went away satisfied, but it was also kind of one of these things of like, you don't, in that moment, you really don't want to give a negative answer. You don't want to be overly cruel. That's not what this is all for. But at the same time, that's also the universe, right? Like we live in a situation where like not all of our hopes are going to be answered, and it's like, yeah, that's one of those things I think that's like you have to build that muscle to be able to kind of hold that space for people and be like, yeah, this from what this indicates, the outcome isn't something you're going to want. That's tough.
Yeah, yeah. Makes me think of the Stockdale paradox that she talked about a couple weeks ago, which is basically this guy who was being tortured, and he like had this ultimate unwavering faith that he would get through it, but he also accepted the brutality of his situation, and in doing so, he was the one person who survived. Like everyone else died of a broken heart. Like, but basically, I think accepting the brutality of life is in some ways part of the job of astrologers too. It's like we deal
Yeah.
with Mars, problems like, like we saw COVID coming before it came, like, and we held space for that. And like, I mean, I don't know. I think, yeah, you have to be kind of willing to accept all aspects of humanity, including gangrenous feet and breakups, if you're going to do this work, because we deal with everything, you know.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah. Well, and sometimes an accurate answer is more helpful than a positive one. Like I think sometimes the negative answer is the right answer. And
mm,
that's
mhm,
um
yeah.
yeah.
I guess one of the things I would, be a teacherly about would be to be careful that when you're not manifesting a bad situation with your answer. So, with the
Right.
health question, it's like, is my health something to worry about? Well, then you're like, it's not looking good. That's not necessarily you manifesting that, because they're already asking about a bad health situation. But let's
Exactly.
say they said, "What's going on for my next 6 months?" And so you pull the cards, and you're like, "Oh, it doesn't look good. You're gonna have a shitty 6 months." Well, you're essentially creating a shitty 6 months,
Right.
as you
you
said.
got to be really you got to guard against that. I think that's part of why. Yeah, I think there's certain kinds of. I think that's why it's really good to have different modalities. Like if you do tarot exclusively, you're likely to kind of like get a bit rigid about card meanings. Or if you do astrology exclusively, you're going to be a bit rigid about like, oh, Saturn means it must mean death, or well, who knows, or that's not a real one. But like, um, I think there's a way in which like I think reading the levels, like what I try to do with people, especially if it seems like there's a negative answer, is I try to say, well, this could play out this way, or this may be speaking at a different level and be talking about this other thing that's like, and something I know you know a lot about remediation is like, especially with astrology, it's like if you can do a thing that will manifest that kind of like harsh aspect in a way that's fruitful. Like if you are in a tough Saturn aspect and you decide, well, I'm going to work on like, giving to charity, or, helping out at a homeless breakfast or something, like doing something Saturn coded that like kind of like uses that Saturn energy for a good purpose. It's like, I think sometimes that's the key is like, even if there's a bad, if you're reading for the next 6 months and you see it's all bad, well, what are ways how do you nuance the bad, how do you tell that story in a way that's like useful to the person and isn't crushing. you know Um,
And I think
yeah,
every time you get a bad card in a reading or a bad dice roll or anything like that, you do have to work it into the story in a way so that people still have a good time. Like in
yeah,
D&D, if you roll a bad dice roll and you're like perception check, you're blind or whatever, it still makes for a good story, right? Like
yeah.
oh, now you're blind in the story, but like I don't know. But I think a good GM would make that a fun thing. Like, oh, now you can't see, and now we can, like a bad GM would be like, "You're blind, you can't play anymore. Sorry."
Yeah, go sit in the corner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it's like how do we receive and integrate the dice roll or the pull of the card? I think is different in each case, and it is part of the job of the diviner.
I think that's where being loose and being open to multiple levels of interpretation is like super helpful.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Um, this is a side note, but do you ever want to come to Everything Under the Sun, which is our Thursday group where we talk about anything and everything?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that sounds very open-ended. I could go over that. That sounds fun. Yeah.
Because talk about the random content generation, it's a random show, but next week we're talking about spellcasting and rituals, and I
Ah,
thought maybe you'd be good for that
yeah, I
night.
love a good ritual.
Okay, so I'll invite you next week. Okay, so accepting bad answers. Okay, we have 3 minutes. Is there anything on your mind? What's QHP?
Oh gosh, that was this thing I was listening to that was basically saying that there's like indeterminacy is in every kind of like occult or weird phenomenon in like yeah, that was from an episode of a thing, and I actually don't know. I just wrote that down as like a so an example of something to talk about, but I didn't really research it.
Oh,
Um, something that maybe I want to talk about is like what does it mean to open and close a divination? And I brought something along as like a prop to talk
okay.
about. These are for I Ching. These are yarrow stocks. This is a very traditional way to do an I Ching reading. Most people read with coins. I read with coins usually because it's faster. But doing a yarrow stock reading, what's cool about it is you start with like a full set, which is 50, and that's kind of like the number 50 has like symbolism that goes way way back. A lot of I Ching symbolism goes back to like the Neolithic period. It's like before writing, it's before a lot of stuff. And in Babylonian times, like 50 was like very, I think it was the sacred number of Enlil. So anyway, 50 is like considered a very important number. But the way you start a reading is you literally take one of the sticks out of the bunch and set it aside, and all of a sudden the set is incomplete, and now you can work with it, right? It's like there's a certain way in which like you're doing a ritual, you're doing a performance of opening up. I think of it kind of like as like peeling an orange, right? The orange is perfect before you peel it, and then but to eat it you have to unpeel it, and you have to kind of make a mess of the orange before you can eat it. The same way with divination, it's like you have to break apart the unity of the perfect 50 stocks, put set one aside, and then you can do all these other kind of operations on it and that's where you can get meaning from it. But before you do that, it's still this perfect, it's the all and the nothing, right? It's the void and the totality. It only becomes number and becomes like useful to interpret when you break it apart. And then of course at the end of the reading you put that 50th stick back and then it's over. It's like
Interesting. Yeah, you have to like shuffle your deck before you can read the deck.
absolutely that's it. Yeah, with deck it would be shuffling. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. All right. Well, we only have 1 minute, so tell people how they can come to your divination group.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we're calling it the Divination Discussion Group for Fearless Fortune Tellers. It's happening this Wednesday, April 1st. I want to do on April Fool's Day because we're enacting the role of the Fool on the Fool card in tarot. We're stepping into the unknown, and any divination, I think, is also partly has that energy of like, you have to be open to doing something foolish that may not end up the way you want, but you need to have that kind of leap of faith to get started. Yeah, where this is happening is at this place called Dream House. It's a bar and kind of coffee house. It's this old Victorian mansion that like was turned into a really cool cocktail lounge. We're gonna meet upstairs 6 to 8 p.m. Wednesday the 1st. And I think for the foreseeable, we're gonna do every Wednesday. So just come by. There's about 4 or 5 of us I know who are coming already. I've been advertising it around town. Yeah, I think it'll be a really fruitful discussion. I have a bunch of things listed on the flyer here. Maybe we can post in the show notes. But this is the thing we're doing, and I wanted to make sure to say that I wanted to make it an open and friendly conversation about diverse techniques, perspectives, histories, and practical experiences with all these different types of divination. Because I know that I have about three or four, I have four divination systems that I use regularly, but I know there's like dozens out there. There's a lot of the ones I don't even know about. And I think a lot of people, especially here in Portland, are very open to, a lot of people have like ancestral practices that are divination. There's a lot of people who have stuff that they're doing that's like, I don't know. Anyway, I want this to be a space where we're all learning. It's not like me saying stuff and, oh, I'm so smart. It's more, I really want people to like bring their full like experience with them. And I want to have like a really fruitful, like sharing
Okay.
space.
All right. Well, go to Dream House. I might see you there. I put it on my schedule. We'll see what my family says. And yeah, thank you, Grandma. It's great to talk to you today. I will see you very soon.
Yeah, this is really fun. Have a great day.
All right. Bye, Graham.